before we get into it, I just want to apologize if you hear any uncivilized barking. It's because we live next to not only one house but two houses full of rabid dogs whose owners refuse to train them. And I'm not gonna lie, reconsidering being a dog person. Anyway, you're here for me to talk about Babylon, so please don't watch this if you didn't watch Babylon, because this will have as many spoilers as a bitter Swiftie on Endgame release day. So I finally watched what everyone said is the best movie of the year. It's no Marcel the Shell with shoes on, but fine. I still don't necessarily agree, but I found myself immediately resonating with Babylon, especially with the overwhelming urge cast over the two protagonists, Manny and Nellie, to be a part of something bigger than themselves and their shared love of going to the movies. Their reasons for worshipping the art of movies themselves, the same reason as mine.
Love watching movies,
I love watching movies too.
And you're watching the movie and
you escape. You have to be in your own shitty fucking life.
And then I felt dragged on a bit. I could not for the life of me care about Brad Pitt's character. It felt like he was written in after the fact. I was only really into Manny and Nellie and the supporting characters, Sydney and Faye. And then, of course, Jean Smart doing her thing, carrying every scene she was in on her back.
I knew Proust, you know.
And then the snake scene happened, which if you saw the movie, you would know what I'm talking about. And I was like, oh my god. This is the Garden of Eden. This Californian desert, and every actor is Adam and Eve. And then with it being titled Babylon, you'd think I would catch on to the biblical references sooner. But frankly, I was just really focused on wanting to see these two fuck. But the movie is a lot. It's so much. Babylon follows a group of ambitious artists trying to make it in Hollywood 100 years ago, the decade when American cinema was changed forever, when the era of the silent film ended and sound was put to screen for the first time. There are many characters with many plots, Brad Pitt's, in my opinion, being the most useless and would bog the movie down. But if you zero in on Manny and Nellie's story, you can't help but notice God and the devil, Adam and Eve. More so than that, Dante and Virgil. Alright, disclaimer. I thought of this while watching the movie. Alright, here are my notes to prove it. Here. I will pretend like I was the first to notice like any biblical references or any references to the Divine Comedy either. I saw some reviews already including them when I logged in on Letterboxd, and I'm not going to take credit for this discovery, only what I wrote here. Thank you, and onto the video. If you were to view this like I did as a retelling of Dante's Divine Comedy, specifically Dante's Inferno, in summation, the most intelligent summation I could give you is a guy called Dante is guided by a guy called Virgil into hell that he made up, Dante. And it's basically him putting all of the people in history he hates into hell and publishing it.
Close that!
We are first introduced to both characters when Nellie is trying her best to get into a party she was most definitely not invited to and is being refused at the gate. Manny, who already had access to the party by doing shady odd jobs for these Hollywood execs, comes to her aid, guiding her in. If you were to view this as a retelling of Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, Manny is a dutiful Virgil guiding a zealous Dante through the portal down to hell, where all the rich people play. Those familiar with Dante's Inferno know that level 1 is Limbo, the in-between state, where those who do not accept Christ into their heart reside. The torture of it being the state of it itself, the potential to get out, but never knowing when, never having that escape guaranteed. Heaven is so near, but they will never be able to enter. Manny and Nellie believe the lives that they live at the moment are hellish and dream of a heavenly Hollywood one instead. Manny, like I said, is doing all the sketchy work to get a shot on a movie set, and Nellie mentions how no one has ever believed in her but herself, and she can't seem to convince anyone else. As mountains of coke are poured over the table, I see no Christ being brought into their hearts, no gates of heaven opening up for them. They discuss their situation and their escape plan. Nellie knows she's a star, and she's gonna have lunch on set with Manny one day. In their high, euphoric state of manifesting their dream life, they have no idea that the life that they're seeking will drag them deeper and deeper and deeper into darkness.
We going again or what?
Yes, of course we're going again!
The second level of Dante Alighieri's depiction of hell is reserved for those whose grave sin was lust. So, like, after watching the dance scene. Speaking of said dance scene, after they get high enough, they exit the secluded room they're in, Nellie dragging him to the dance floor. In this scene, these two characters have the most bonkers, off-the-wall sexual chemistry. I genuinely thought, considering that this isn't an orgy already, that they were just going to tear each other's clothes off and fuck on the floor like rabid animals. But Nellie dances on him, a smug smile plastered on her face as his entranced eyes follow her every move, his body seeming to always be on the verge of falling on top of hers. He is so enchanted by this brazen woman who doesn't seem to mind being lusted after and in fact wants it from him. You can see the temptation in his eyes, the restraint in his breath, and then he's interrupted. Rather than escaping, he is forcefully pulled from this layer of hell. Motherfucker! The third layer is for gluttonous people. Those who are hedonistic and overindulge in things they shouldn't. Like, I don't know, everyone at this fucking party. According to Dante, this layer is inhabited by living organs, and the image of naked bodies writhing around on the floor comes to mind. I do think the party itself, with all the drugs, sex, and drinks, could be the gluttonous layer, but there's so much gluttony in these characters in this story that it doesn't even stop here. In this party scene, we're introduced to Jack, a washed-up, alcoholic, lazy actor who seems to be the very personification of the sin. Every aspect of his personality would land him being punished in this third layer forever. After the party, Manny has to take him home as he's passed out from the night before. He then offers Manny a job, just like how Nellie managed to get lucky at the right place at the right time to replace a dead girl's role. The next morning, they pass from this layer to the next.
Who the fuck? Mr. Wallach.
Greed is the biggest layer of hell in this movie. It is the most overarching and emphasized sin in the main characters for a good portion of the story. We never leave the fourth layer of greed. We pass through others, but come back to it throughout the whole movie. It stays in our characters long and strong enough to corrupt their hearts. In Dante's famous poem, it is here that greedy individuals are punished, losing their soul and carrying around a huge weight on their chest instead, wallowing in their self-pity and their lies, never enough to suffice their ever-hungry appetite. On this morning, we pass to this layer of hell, where Nellie gets her first role and Manny gets his first job on set. They both show incredible work, and both crews are amazed at what they can do in their respective jobs. Nellie being able to sob very hard on command, and Manny's resourcefulness bringing a somehow even more neurotic Spike Jonze a camera before the sun sets.
I love you, yes!
This is their first taste of what they thought would be heaven, and they need more. As their careers rise, Nellie starts playing dirty to steal the spotlight away from her female co-stars. Nellie's father also gets in on her day in the sun, riding her coattails, exploiting her career for a themed diner. Although Manny gets corrupted by greed a little later than Nellie, it is no less. A lot of his behavior changes to his concern with not only keeping a job in the industry, but rising through it and keeping the big execs happy. The greed drives him to other layers of hell, the contents of which I'll discuss when we get there. Jack, stop. Don't fucking look at me like that.
Mother fucking shit cocksucking! What the fuck?
Nellie moves to the next layer of hell when she gets her next role, wrath. According to the poem, it is here where those who are overrun by wrath are punished, screaming and shouting and arguing with each other over a stinking, scolding river. Back on set, it's getting hotter, there's no AC, and she is sweating all over her script. It's almost like she's somewhere historically depicted by being really warm. She can't seem to shoot a take without getting interrupted, and with each go, she and the crew get increasingly frustrated. She eventually joins them in screaming herself, attempting to fight one of them, things growing increasingly nasty by the minute, all over inconsequential interruptions. She wanted this. She wanted to be here. And here a fury is seen that we haven't witnessed before in her in this environment. Now, the next layers, layers 6 and 7, are integrated, in my belief, in this movie.
Just next time, say the count.
Now's not really the fucking time.
Found it!
So, a couple scenes later, at a party, Nellie really wants to see a man fight a snake. No one in their right mind is doing so, so she steps up to the plate, and of course, she gets bit. I believe that this is also a reference to the Garden of Eden. And this is the moment when all the biblical shit clicked for me. The snake represents her hubris, her ego, having picked it up and swung it around, having this belief that she's stronger than it, more powerful, that she could defeat it, making her a heretic. As the snake bites her in front of everyone, we see that this is the point of no return for her. She is punished for her hubris as Eve is punished by God, by having to give up her indulgences, her habits, her personality, and everything that makes her Nellie Leroy.
Who sneezed? Who the fuck sneezed?
Layer 7, which is violence, makes an appearance in this scene as well. Obviously, challenging a snake to fight you is an obvious act of violence, but violence is threatened to Nellie later on in the movie, and violence is enacted upon Manny later on in the movie as well, but we'll get to that.
Fuck this shit!
Now, as I mentioned when we discussed greed, Manny's greed in particular leads him to become someone inauthentic, attempting to bring those close to him down with him. This is when he crosses to the next layer of hell, the 8th layer, fraud. He thinks he's bringing Nellie up, softening all her edges and ironing out her Jersey accent, and essentially turning her into a phony doll to help her image, to make her a star again after the snake incident. But to be a star again, she must be an entirely different person, which also leads her to the fraudulent 8th layer of hell, where the worst liars are bound to reside forever. Nellie overhears Manny talking about fixing her image and promises to change. She attends a gala dressed prim and proper, a stark contrast to the last gathering we saw her at in just overalls. She pretends to be someone else, talking to actors she normally wouldn't, actors who look down their noses at her, who try to humiliate her by prodding pseudo-intellectual questions knowing she doesn't know the answer. Pretending becomes very exhausting, and she explodes once again in a wrathful rampage. In doing so, though, she escapes this level of hell all by herself, and this is the first one any of them have been able to do so all on their own.
I will shit on you! I will shit in your mouth, I promise you!
While Nellie is still in this 8th layer, I believe Manny has already crossed over to the 9th, Treachery, where the betrayers and backstabbers are tortured for eternity, where Satan himself watches over them. Manny betrays who would be his friends in the name of the job, the industry, the business he's finally gotten himself in. Sydney and Faye, 2 innocent people he was in the company of, he betrayed in a way. He was the one who personally went to fire Faye from the studio, insinuating that her sexuality is a bad image. When they are filming the brass band, he goes to Sydney and tells him to artificially darken his skin tone with charcoal to match the lighting, and what he means is to match the rest of the band. Sydney rightfully looks disappointed in him, watching Manny manipulate him into doing something so offensive and disrespectful. You see it in his eyes. He never expected a request like that to come from him, as he was the one who brought the camera onto the orchestra in the first place. It's around this time that Nellie comes to his door after a bender, the perfect good girl persona barely lasting an hour. She gambled, pissed the wrong guys off, and owes them $85,000. She comes to her only true friend for help, and he yells at her. He tells her how she fucked his life, even though he, knowingly or unknowingly, tried to do the same with her when he thought to fix her image. He chooses to escape this circle for the first time on his own as well, choosing to be faithful to the starry-eyed, bold girl he met so many nights ago. And for a moment, they venture back into fraud. In a coked-out brainstorm session, Manny concocts a plan to say that this was all part of Nellie's acting process to explain her hedonistic behavior. And the money that Manny got to fix it all? Prop money. It was all fake. Fraud. A betrayal. From a stupid guy in a red cloak. He doesn't even realize that the money is fake until he gives it over to the devil himself, sitting high up on a couch where he could watch all the treacherous souls freeze. Now, if this is supposed to be hell, Tobey Maguire's character Jim is obviously supposed to be Satan. He is made to look unsettling, dressed in red, talks creepy and soulless with a glee that isn't quite there. His face is pale, sweaty, with dark circles around his eyes, as if he's been in the heat for too long. Jim insists on taking Manny to a hidden location where he keeps all of his tortured souls. An underground fight club / sex dungeon, a claustrophobic cave similar to the description of where the violent souls are punished. He then mentions there are other floors to a terrified Manny, as he forces him to follow him down as the lighting gets redder and redder the deeper they go. They travel deeper, where people are literally being held in cages, as imprisoned fighters are worse. There's inhuman noises being heard, growling, howling. Manny's eyes widen and water, holding back the urge to weep. The prisoners moan, and there's an alligator on the floor, gnashing its teeth. The telltale signs of not only hell, but when the devil is near. Jim finds out the money is fake, and starts getting his prisoners or his goons or both to shoot at Manny, and he narrowly escapes. The next morning, Manny gets back to Nellie, dragging her to his car en route to Mexico, which in this comparison, I guess, would be to the surface, back to Earth. Manny is terrified to the core, and Nellie is still high, hardly concerned with any of it. Nellie is tempted by shiny hedonistic things along the way, drugs and partying. Manny is focused on leaving, but Nellie wants to stay. She believes she belongs here, that she's at peace with being in hell. She knows that this is her home. She tells Manny she's no good for him, as if she's a demon and he's an angel, but all he is in love with her. He proposes in this desperate moment before escape, and she accepts. The car parks, and Manny leaves her alone for just a moment. She's tempted once again by hedonism, a simple pleasure as dancing in the street, dancing further and further away from him. Manny narrowly escapes yet another shootout, coming back, screaming her name with a blood-stained face. He knows he has to go, with or without her. He can't stay. If he stays, he'll be tortured for eternity. He drives off into the night. Nellie doesn't get out. The minute the snake bit her, her soul was damned here. Not unlike another story that tells of a girl's soul bound to hell from a simple bite of fruit. She dies of an overdose. Her legacy just a small square in the margin of a newspaper. Manny, however, looks like he escaped to Mexico. Years later, we see him with a wife and a daughter back in Los Angeles. Not even the virtue of a family could stave off his temptation to come back to Kinescope Pictures. Nobody ever truly exits hell. No one can. It's always going to be waiting for you. I guess that's what I took from this movie, which shows that I need to get more light-hearted interests, I think. But I rewatched it and cut all the excess Brad Pitt fat off, and it's a 5-star movie to me, in my opinion. And of course, like, you're welcome to disagree with me. I just found his arc extremely boring. This is it for this video. I hope you liked it. I hope you found my analysis engaging and interesting. And if there's anything else that you want me to compare to biblical imagery, biblical myth, anything like that, that's kind of like my sweet spot. So if you got any like Cain and Abel parallels, if you got any Garden of Eden parallels, if you got literally any biblical story parallels, I would love, love, love to dive deep into them. I believe Catholicism caused me to develop an anxiety disorder, but as it made me petrified of hell, it also made me so interested in it. And the very different depictions you see throughout media. But as I said, I hope you enjoyed. Leave me feedback. Again, I'm cool with any kind of feedback. I'm just not cool with unwarranted criticism. I will bite. I will cry, and then I'll bite. And leave me suggestions on what you want me to do next, literally anything. And I still don't have an outro, so bye!